you for having me, and Bonnie, thank you for doing this as always. They're always really interesting, and I'm honored to be able to talk to you guys. My name is W Choi, and I am the founding managing partner of Serval Ventures. I did not set out to be in venture because when I was younger, I didn't know what venture was. So I actually started out in arts, where I learned to work with creatives, because I think tech and entrepreneurs are creatives. And then I worked in nonprofits, where I learned to work really lean. I worked in philanthropy, where I learned to start assessing investments. And then I did consulting for a really long time with both nonprofit and for-profit. I've done, high-level strategic planning, board development, investment, strategy, fundraising, etc. Then I started teaching entrepreneurs, and that's when I started meeting a lot of startups. And they started saying, we can't afford your consulting rate, so be our advisor. And I'm like, okay. And I'm a consultant. I give advice, people take it, I get paid, everybody's happy. But the startups weren't taking my advice, and I'm like, I don't understand this. So I decided I need to be an investor so they will listen to me. And then what I did was I did a lot of research, and I realized that a lot of it goes back to a lot of the venture models as well as accelerator models. Everything goes back to early Silicon Valley. But I was looking at the technology, and I was like, I think we need to evolve venture investment, the model for venture investment. So that's what I launched Serval to do. And I launched it saying that we are data focused and people centric, because I believe in the power of data and promising talent. And I believe we can train people to be more innovative and increase their innovation mindset and performance. It's not easy. It's not straightforward, but it's doable, right? And that's partly what I'm trying to do, always in the background with women and people of color. And then with data, people were like, you need an industry vertical or you're gonna fail. And I'm like, really? I don't understand, because data cuts across all industries. And they kept saying I was going to fail, and I met a lot of VC firms that were starting up. It seemed like there was a period where every week there was a new VC firm. A lot of them went out of business. And then when I was in business for 2 years, investment bankers started calling me and said, we like to look at your deal flow. And I'm like, I'm sure you would, because I have de-risked it for you, right? So that's a quick background on Serval. So I didn't realize, but to some extent, my brain works differently than other people's. And I thought everybody saw what I saw in my head for most of my life. And then when I realized I see things very differently, it really changed the way I communicated. And I've been a data nerd from a very young age, because when I was in like middle school, I heard about Moore's law for the first time. And when I wrapped my head around what that means, I was like, my parents had this whole set of encyclopedias, right? It took up like 2 shelves of a big, large bookcase. And, I would, check it out every so often. I think they were hoping we would read the whole thing. That didn't happen with any of my sisters. I was the only one that would crack it open every once in a while, but it was very haphazard. But I understood Moore's law, and I'm like, oh, so in the future, that means that whole encyclopedia set is going to somehow be in the palm of our hands. And I think I said it to a couple of people, and they thought I was crazy, so I stopped saying that. And then throughout most of my life, the reason why I understand data, I think more than other people, is that I worked with a lot of databases very early on. So I had to figure out, how do I extract information from this thing, right? And that's at a time when a lot of people didn't really even even, they would complain about computers like it was a intransigent child, right? And they would say, it's not working, it's so temperamental. And I'm like, no, it's a computer. it's like very straightforward. If you understand how to work how it works, then you will understand how to get the most out of it. Same thing with the database. I think, if you understand data, and you don't need to know it inside out, but if you have sort of a general understanding of the kinds of data, what kinds of data are better for, then you can get a lot out of it. And so, for instance, I was hired to consult years and years and years ago for a very large museum. They had a ginormous exhibition coming from overseas, and they needed to build a database to really catalog everything. And then they also wanted to use a database to help work on how to manage the exhibition. And the designer actually brought me in. And it was very interesting because I sat in on the strategy meetings early on, and every different department had different ideas. The installers were like, no, we just need to know how big and how strong the plinths need to be for the objects, right? And then the curators were like, no, we need to understand the provenance and the material and things like that, right? And the designer was trying to, and then there were some techie people trying to take notes, and they're like, but what kind of data do you want that to be? Do you want that to be a text field? Do you want that to be a radio box? And the other people, they couldn't answer. They're like, what's a radio box? What's that mean, right? And none of them were talking to each other. So it was really interesting. So the designer and I were trying to explain, how they needed to talk about it and try to translate for the tech people what the other people were saying, right? So I've had the experience of working with all kinds of complex and less complex. There was one database where I had to take workshops for like a week to understand how to use it. It was so complex, and it was a terrible database. So I've learned to work with all sorts of data all throughout my life. I actually think that, people talk about financial illiteracy, math illiteracy. I think data illiteracy is a big, big problem in this world. It's a huge problem in this world because there is so much data out there. So remember, we have more than an encyclopedia now in the palm of our hands, right? And we have a steady stream of almost infinite information on our smartphones, right? On our computers, on screens all around us, right? That are changing and dynamic. So we have to start to learn how to process and sort of conceptualize and organize the data. And that's what I think, that's also why we're so fatigued and stressed, because we have so much data coming at us, and our human brains are not evolving at the pace of technology, right? It's slower. We can do amazing things, but it's slower. So we have to find different ways to deal with it, right? So I think that I think the best thing we can do, like for instance, for students, is to teach them data literacy, not statistics. That will bore the shit out of them. I'm sorry, I'm going to try not to curse. That will bore them to death, and that would turn them away from data. But make it interesting. There's a lot of different ways that you could do data projects. And one of the ways is, I think that data visualization, right? You could give them data sets and say, okay, tell a story with this data, because that is the biggest challenge for startups and businesses. That's a big, big challenge, right? So, and as we start to go into the 5G world, so for those of you who don't know, maybe you do know, I apologize if it's boring, but 4G is mostly what we have. Even when your phone says it's on a 5G system, that doesn't necessarily mean you have 5G capabilities. But 4G means that there's a tower, and it can manage the data of 4,000 devices, right? 5G means that it can handle 1 million devices. So we just went exponentially, we just blew up, right? And then 5G towers are smaller and they can be put all over the place, right? And there's different kinds of 5G, right? There's longer distance and shorter distance 5G. So I asked a data scientist once, I'm like, what do you think is the biggest challenge of 5G? And he said, data curation, right? Because up until now, a lot of companies, the way they have been gaining value is they have been grabbing data, right? It's a big data grab. And that's what Big Blue did, right? And that's what IBM did. And guess what? IBM said they were going to cure cancer like 10 years ago with a lot of data. And that has not happened. And I think it's partly because they thought data itself was the only answer, but it's the curation and the handling of the data, right? So I think that with 5G, we have to really better understand what data do we want? How much do we want? How do we want it? How do we want to organize it so we can access the data again? Because you can have a ton of data, but if you cannot access it and pull out the data you need, it's worthless. It is garbage, right? So, and I think for the future, what that means is that we're going to have a whole different set of fields that are going to open up, professional fields. There's going to be data curators. There's going to be data ethicists. There's going to be a whole range of data visualization people, those that are strategizing and architecting data visualization, and those that are going to dev data visualization, just like we have for tech, right? You have tech coders, that are the grunt workers, and then you have the tech architects that are really designing the whole system and everything in between, right? So I think in the future, there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of schools that are starting to develop data science programs. A lot of what I've seen coming out of those data science programs, though, is that they're teaching them a lot of code about how to analyze the data. But what I'm not seeing is the very big overview kind of contextualization of how to handle data, how to think about data, how to organize, and how to manage the data to make it work for us. We do not have to be slaves of data, okay? And if we do not understand data, then you can essentially get conned or taken advantage of because you don't understand the data, right? But that's a hard thing to ask individuals to do. That's like saying we are responsible because we read all the privacy forms. Okay, come on. Seriously, if we all had to read the privacy and terms of use before we checked the box, we would never use anything, and it would take us literally 30 years to read it all, right? So I think that also places a burden on companies and startups to think more about different data policies. And I think over the next 20 years, we're going to start to have to, legislators, corporations, everybody's going to have to start to deal with those issues, right? And especially because we're going into AI. AI era, it's all about data, right? AI does not work without data, right? So, and I keep telling startups, one of the things is almost every startup I see, whether they're hardware, whether they're a marketplace, whether, they're developing, a product or services. I'm like, what's your data strategy? Because a lot of them, I can see data, right? A data place somewhere in there. And they go, we're going to have one when we get enough data. And I'm telling you, once you have enough data, it's going to be a mess to organize it. Like, it's like saying, okay, I'm just going to scribble down people's names and contact information on all these random pieces of paper, and then I'll organize it later when I have a giant box. That's the equivalent, right? that's a nightmare. So you need to think about a data strategy before you have data. And then you can start to, there's now technology that can, before you used to, it's like Excel, you had to have exactly the right field. You had to designate exactly what kind of data goes in that field. Now, there are some technologies that can clean what are called data lakes, which is just a dump of data, right? Essentially, think about a lake and you just throw data in there, right? But the thing is, it's not completely accurate. The technology are still like, some say it can go up to 80%, some it might only be 40%. So it's not as accurate. So what that means is you're still going to have to do some data cleaning after the tech goes into it. And the bigger the lake, a whole lot bigger job that is, right? And so you need to think about these things. And even if you didn't do it right before, you can start it at any time and really work on it, right? And you should be continually working on your data strategy, right? And then what I say to startups is tech. I see so many startup founders who are focused on the tech. They're like, I got a cool tech. I think it could be used for this, I think, right? And oftentimes it's not the right problem solution fit. I'm a big one about getting the right problem solution fit. But the other thing is that if you focus on the data tech, great, you can probably 10x a company. But if you focus on the data, you can 100x a company. And right now we're still in the frontier days of data, AI. They're getting more sophisticated, but we're still in the frontier days. So the opportunity is bigger with data than tech. So if you go to someone and say, I have an investor, and I say, I have a SaaS platform, or you say, I have a data platform, I guarantee you they're going to get much more excited. If they know anything, they're going to get much more excited about the data platform, right? And everything is data now. So what I want to do is, I know this sounds kind of, I see Abby and her brows are furrowed, and I understand it can sound very abstract. I get it. I'm just the kind of person, I walk around, I'm like, oh, so many disaggregated data sets. I look around me and I'm like, oh, the things we could do if we could aggregate some of these data sets, right? And then also even aggregating or making data available, more freely available, then that brings up all kinds of privacy and use, and ethics concerns, right? So we got a whole lot of things to wade through in data. So we're not going to cover all of it today. But what I wanted to do was answer questions. And I am not a data scientist. I am not a tech expert by far. I am very good at understanding broad strokes, and I see trends. So I can talk about that. I can also, if you have a startup, what I'd like to do is maybe go around, have everybody introduce yourself. And if you have a startup, I'd be happy to talk to you about what I see of data possibilities for your startup, right? Would that be useful? Yes? Okay. So why don't we go around and do that? So somebody who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
So my name is Natasha Noree Standard. I am the owner and founder of Equal Footing. So we manufacture and design military grade combat boots sized for the female foot. You'd be surprised in 2021 that if you're a female like me, when I was in the military, I wear a size 7.5. My military grade combat boots were a size 6, and they never touched my ankles or my supported my feet at all. And I was lucky not to get any lower extremity injuries, even though I jumped out of airplanes and jumped out of helicopters. I was very lucky. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve.
Okay. So hang on. I'm just taking notes. So that's very interesting, right? And a lot of what happens in the world is that a lot of tests, like especially in pharma, as we've heard, are done on men, right? And the fact that in the military, all the sizes are sized for men, right? And so what that means is that no one is testing for women, right? So I think for military, but even beyond, right? So do you have data on is it really just the size, or are there differences in the way the women's feet are formed, on the way the impact hits when you're, jumping, right?
Well, luckily, I went to shoe school in Milan, Italy. So I'm well versed on this. So the female foot is not simply a scaled down version of a male foot. There are specific differences. Right. I mean, I can list them all, but there are some specific differences. And you're right about, of course, you're right about the not testing on women, because women makes up only 20% of the overall military. However, women make up more than 60% of lower extremity injuries.
So here's some various data points. So first of all, you could just take the kind of data that you've developed to start to maybe even like partner and apply it to, for instance, hiking shoes, right? Even though I don't buy military boots, I've never found hiking shoes that I think are really comfortable, right?
Okay.
So that's one. And women are getting more active outdoors and everything, right? So there's that immediate. The other thing I'm thinking of, and this is all off the top of my head, right? So the other thing is, if you started to quantify some of the costs, right, of how much it costs the military, right, to deal with that 60% increase of injuries in the lower extremities, which can be very complicated. No, because I have bad knees, right, and I've had knee surgery. Then what you could do is you could use that to potentially increase your sales with all kinds of military divisions all over the world.
Yeah, the difficult thing about that is, so you're in the military, so that's the Department of Defense. And so when you leave the military, you're compensated through Veterans Affairs. So Veterans Affairs has to report to the National Institute of Health. So not necessarily is the Department of Defense connected to the Veterans Affairs as far as budget is concerned.
Go through wherever you need. So NIH, they're going to be interested in the health impacts and the costs, right?
Okay, yes.
So you could leverage the NIH and then, the NIH can also help you connect to the military, right? Yeah. And then not just in the US, but like think about other countries, right? Where it's going to cost them money unless they have better gear for their women combat.
Yeah, I had a Australian military officer contact me about.
Yeah, I would follow up with that, because you'd be surprised. I mean, the US has very specific ways they do things, but if you get some traction somewhere, people will hear about it. If something is good, people will hear about it, right? The other thing is, even in the military, there are innovation divisions, right?
Yes.
And so I would target that rather than veterans, right? I know that your immediate connection might be with the Veterans Affairs, but try to, that may not be your only entree point, right? And then the fact that you are a veteran developing a startup, like Bunker Labs, right? They have a whole national network, and there are other like military-based kind of like programs, right? Veteran programs. And I like veterans because veterans, the one thing you're really taught how to do is execute. And investors, and investors want to see execution, right? So I would say utilize those data points, and then try to figure out how do you connect them, right? And then how do you leverage those data points to say, because what is it that your customers want? Customers want to save or make money, right? And investors want to get returns on that money, and they can't do that unless their startup that they invest in is making money, right? So it's all virtuous circle. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention something, speaking of shoes. And especially if you're selling into the European and overseas markets, that I have a European mother, I do not have American feet. I have European feet. I could
Mm-hmm.
never buy shoes in the US. You know about this problem, right, Natasha? European feet are different. My feet are straight, American feet are crooked. So yes, be aware of that as well. I just wanted to mention that. And thank you.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And there's a lot of people who are developing like customized insoles, and you could possibly partner with those kind of companies to help them better understand the metrics around the feet, right? Because I'm not sure that they really understand feet quite like you do. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
because usually military women, that's what we do. We call it the women's tax. So we have to purchase an
Yeah.
insole
yeah.
or double up on socks to
Yeah.
make those boots fit. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Good luck. Who wants
Thank
to go
you.
next? Nobody? Abby. Okay.
I
Abby,
can go
we can
next.
go. Yes.
No one else is ready. We use a lot of data to sort of position our company. We are working on a home hygiene brand that sort of elevates the experience into a ritual of well-being. So we have some really cool NASA botanicals that we're working with. And we also included scent as a large part of the brand. And we used a lot of data in deciding to position the brand this way. The person who has the NASA license I helped him build his lab, and he normally does beauty. He's focused more on that sector. And we weren't interested in developing a beauty brand with some of his NASA technology. And the reason being is because there were 30,000 prestige beauty launches in 2020. Half of them were in stores and stores were closed. It's just so saturated. The unit economics are very good for that category, which is why investors keep dumping money into it, but we only have so many faces. And there is a much bigger, area in our home that we can beautify. So we also noticed that, cleaning products were up like 50% in 2020. And those we're home more. Those are rituals that are going to continue to be important for our lifestyles. We're thinking a lot about the purchases. People are spending like 40% more in some cases and buying 20% less. That was sort of, the data that we were seeing in the prestige market because they have more time to sit at home and really think, do I need this? And if I do, what do I want it to be? And then we also noticed candles and home scent were up 60%. So we use a lot of data to sort of position the brand. I'm not sure how we would use data going forward because we're a CPG brand. So we're not necessarily, we're going to do some subscription-based stuff. And that's really where the big money is in this market, is getting, just a few thousand subscribers can, be an incredibly profitable business. But it would be helpful if we had a stronger data or tech play for investors, just because it's attractive for them. I just don't know what it would be.
So the first immediate thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure there are other potential, you are going after a more affluent market, right?
I would say our price point is just slightly higher at the end of the day, but we're doing a lot of features for that. So I would call it like, I'm going to say masstige because it's more like a department store term, but the pricing is probably similar to that.
Right, but it's slightly more affluent, right? And these are discretionary buys, right? And the fact that people are buying them, right, means that they have disposable income, right? This is a great target market for a lot of brands, right? And I'm not saying sell your customer data, but if you really understand your customers and what they use, then possibly you could you could do data insights, right, for other companies that want to reach your customers, right? There's one. The other thing too that hits me is that you are talking about, and it's interesting that you use the word hygiene. Why hygiene?
Well, hygiene denotes well-being. So it does elevate the category to sort of a well-being status as opposed to like home cleaning. And it's also part of kind of how we're interested in changing the messaging. Because there's just, this whole like scrubbing, it's sort of like almost like there's a lot of negative emotions that we associated with those products and how they're presented. It's very severe. And the truth is how we maintain our homes, the branding of it could be more similar to the branding of beauty products. We're beautifying our homes. So that's hygiene it's sort of the association with well-being. It means the same thing.
Well, in some ways, beauty is a little bit, some aspects of beauty are a little discretionary, right? But I think what you want is position yourself as this is necessary, right? I think of more like meditation, right? What your brand as more akin to things like meditation and like, general well-being, right? Less than, I think of hygiene as cleanliness, right? And so I think what you want to do is maybe one, you could try to do some testing of your words. So gather data, right, around how people feel, sentiment analysis around various wording, right? That could also increase, especially now. I mean, people, there's mixed messages about don't kill 99% of your germs. That's not good, right? Versus, feel better, how do you feel better in this really stressful times, right? I think that's a better sell than be cleanly, right? And hygiene. So you might want to do some, and there's two types of data. There's quantitative data, but there's also qualitative data. And there's a lot of really important data around customer sentiment analysis, right? So if you could do a little testing, one, I think you could change your wording, but I think you would learn a lot about your customers. And then the other thing that strikes me is that what you are doing is you actually, the way you talk about it, it's a much more holistic view of how you're going to take care of your house, right? It's not like just put a candle here, right? So I think what you might want to also do is like, as you're doing this like sentiment analysis testing, you could even be asking customers like sort of, broader, questions to understand what are they trying to do overall in their home. Most people, I think, busy people, and this was me, right? I had this vision of this beautiful home that was all organized and, it looked like magazines. I never could achieve it, right? I was always struggling, but, I do have scented candles, and I have those air, rods thing, right? One things. So because I don't like when it's stinky and, and I want things to look nice, and I want to feel comfortable and happy in my home, right? And you've hit on something very important. So what you might want to also do is the thing about brands and products is I don't think people always use it, right? They don't know how to put it together. So that's why designers have jobs, right? And so what you could do is just as personal shoppers, right? Help people put outfits together, right? Instead of buying a whole set of design services, you guys could be the brand that helps people sort of design their home on the cheap, so to speak.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So you could use the data insights you're collecting from your customers to give them kind of recommendations about not only which products to buy, but where to place it, how to use it together, right? So that they can get the effect that they want.
Interesting. Okay.
Right?
Cool.
So by doing that, then what you're giving people value beyond just the product. You are giving them, and I think the best beauty products and that's why the best beauty influencers, that's what they're able to do. They're not just telling you about the product, but they're telling you how to use it for the best effect, right? And how to use it with other things and combine it together. And the combinations, I think, are hard for people, trying to figure out the right combos, right?
That's interesting.
Okay. So try that. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Go next.
Okay. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, June. Thanks for taking the time today.
Sure.
So I think you and and I are very aligned on our philosophy. So ClearOps is a knowledge management platform for privacy and security operations data.
Okay.
Basically came from the premise, I'm a lawyer, came from the premise that the reason businesses are having so much trouble with organizing, with data breaches, things like that, is because they haven't organized how they operate from a privacy and security standpoint. So they have data in different teams, it's all in silos, it's all spread around throughout the organization. And so we came up with some ideas about how to pretty quickly and easily collect that data into a platform and then help the businesses do some of the transactional things they're trying to do, like prove to customers that they have good practices and stuff like that.
I like that. We need to talk. You and I are fellow data nerds, man.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer and I hate it when lawyers say, oh, I don't do math. I'm like, stop saying that. You're giving us a bad name.
I mean, it's like if you're in business, on a whole nother thing, I've done workshops where I'm like, if you're in business, you need to speak the language of numbers. It is a language. And if you are not fluent in numbers, you don't have any business being in business, right? You're going to get taken. So, so I think what you're doing is very interesting. And say again, the first part, what you do about data and security, just tell me how you say it.
Knowledge management platform for privacy and security operations data.
Management platform. That's a mouthful.
Yeah. It's better than it was. Still working on it.
You know what I think you are? You'll find a shorter, better, more concise way to say this, but I think basically what you are is you need to tell them, look, whether you know it or not, you are as much a data company as anything else. And what we do is we help keep your data clean throughout all your business departments and processes, right? So what you're doing is really helping them organize and clean their data processes. It's not just their data, but the flow, right, of data. So I think if you talk about it a little bit more, don't say platform, don't say management, right? It's too broad, right? Everybody uses that, right? It's generic now, right? Instead, talk about the fact that you are helping them organize their data flows and processes so that they, at any point in their organization, they know what they have and they know how to get it. And it's secure, right? That's kind of what you're doing, right? So you need to help them understand that. And so like, oh, there was a story that popped into my mind and I just sort of lost it. Oh, I was talking to a consultant who deals with clinical trials. And she said one of the biggest mistakes of companies is that they design their clinical trials to get their FDA approval. What they don't understand is that then their customers also have to get reimbursement from the health plans, right? And they don't design their trials to figure out how best to position themselves for that, right? So it's kind of akin to that, right? So what you're doing is you're saying that you think your knowledge and your data is just purely used for this, and this is an endpoint for your data. But the endpoint for your data is how the data all throughout your system, right? And how the data at the end will also, Lil put data plumber.
Yeah.
That's good.
That was
funny. Because, it's like in that movie Moonstruck, right? The guy taps on the pipe and he goes, oh, and then he gets paid a lot of money and he's able to afford a mistress and a giant house. But what your biggest challenge is not that you don't understand data or what to do with data. you have to tell the story to your customer, right? And you have to tell the story about understanding the broader implications of their data, right? So it's everything from the moment they touch the data, right? Maybe even come up with the story about sort of what happens to the data and the perils, right? Of what happens to the data if they don't have your system in place, right? Whereas if they do have your system in place, I'm seeing a little cartoon character in my head, little data cartoon character, and is going along this perilous path. And at the end, it's a very happy, safe data, cartoon character where it's like, okay, it's safe. And all along the way, you have protected not only your own data, but your customers' data, so that you are avoiding potential litigation, right? And potential lawsuits and, all kinds of problems, right? And then in the end, not only do they have a happy little data character, but they also have data that now they can better understand and use.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
To
Yeah.
then go back and then get more returns out of that whole cycle. So I think that's your biggest challenge, is that, I'm not kidding when I say there's a huge data illiteracy problem, and people who are really smart, who I think should understand data, I'm like, when they say something and I'm like, you don't understand data, do you? Right? So let me give you an example, and hopefully this doesn't get back to him, but the founder of Via. Do you guys know Via?
Yep.
Via is a ride aggregation platform, but unlike Uber, instead of single rides, it's for groups, right? And so they say it's better for the environment, it's much cheaper, right? And then he said, we have so much data. And I was like, my ears perked up and I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. What are you doing with that data? And he said, well, we're optimizing our routes. And I said, okay, if you get huge enough, and then he said, we're also getting corporate customers, right? And so instead of like everybody taking the subway, the workers taking the subway, they can take Vias to work. And I said, well, if you're doing that, you have the potential to change traffic in New York City, right? So if you did a deal with your customers based on when you see traffic happening, where the routes are, you could even say and customize and say, okay, your company is in this congested area when at 8 o'clock, right? So in the morning, so we'll give you a discount if you have people come into work at 9 or 9:30, right? I mean, that's huge, right? So, and he was like, oh, we didn't think about that. And I'm like, oh, and this is a guy who's data focused, right? So I thought that was really interesting. So people really do not underestimate how little people understand data, right? And so I think you really need to figure out like a number of different stories to help illustrate it. And then if you could, I think what would be useful, very useful giveaway, right, would be a sheet that kind of just shows the data journey in an organization, right? With the privacy and liability issues along the way, right?
That's interesting.
And that could
Thank
be
you.
a great sales, a sales piece, right?
Yep.
Okay, good luck to you.
Thank
But I
you.
do want to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, who's next?
This is David. I am a co-founder of a ed tech company. We're sort of in our third iteration. The first was before I joined with the co-founder, and he did everything pretty much, word processor. Then a couple of years ago, I joined with him and we moved things to a proper SaaS-based educational software. We're focused on achievement and retention in mathematics, K-12. That's presently the only subject area we deal with. With that second iteration, our third grade trial classroom increased their end of year exam scores by 2.8 times. In other words, almost tripled the percent of students who passed the exam. That was in an inner city Baltimore school where pass rates are typically pretty low. We're unable to get all the data we desired from that piece of software. It was somebody else's software. So we've spent the past year building our own software. So we're very late in the MVP process. I won't babble about software, but it's a very data-rich application that we're constructing. And I'll just say one or two other things. We do not teach math. We have a system for adjust the situation such that students do not forget the math that they have learned. And forgetting and retention is a huge issue in mathematics because it's one of the subjects that really builds upon it. The things that you learned last year are needed for this year. Mm-hmm. Whereas maybe in a history or social studies setting, you don't need that so much.
Right.
So retention is vital to mathematics, and we are the retention specialists.
Okay, very interesting. First of all, one thing I would suggest is you say you help increase by 2.8 times.
Correct.
Okay.
That was our pilot.
So what I would suggest to you is you say something like, we increase retention by 208%, 80%, or something like that.
All right.
Right? That is such a number that helps people really tune in, where you say 2.8. I even started to think, oh, that seems low, because I thought you were going to say like 2.8%. Right? But if you say 280%, right?
Yeah.
It's a much more impactful number you're throwing at someone, right?
Very good point. Yep.
And I'm a little surprised for a numbers person that you didn't think of that sooner. So because that is really amazing, right? And people just don't listen very well, right? Our listening skills are declining as we're just bombarded with more information, right? And our attention spans get shorter and shorter. So think about that and think about how you take all the numbers that you present to anybody and you try to make it much more impactful, because usually, as you know, with numbers, you can say it in different ways, right? So think about that very carefully. I think what you're doing is very, very important because it is absolutely true, because I have seen it with my daughter. You need to retain what you learned earlier and it builds, right? Mm-hmm. On a non-data side, I'm a little concerned that you're saying you're building your own software. While that is good, ultimately, my guess is you are not funded. You don't have a big round. You didn't close a big round, because that's when you should be really trying to rebuild something, right? And there are a lot of companies and startups that are offering data analytics and data capture services and products, right? So my guess, and I don't claim to know all of them. My guess is that for much cheaper than it costs to build, unless you got like, internal slave labor and you're not paying anybody, right? So I think cheaper might be to also, or faster too, even if you have someone cheap to build it, also to use some of the off-the-shelf capabilities, because these are products where people have spent often years and years developing, right? So you're exponentially increasing your capability by years, essentially, right? And then use some of those off-the-shelf products to collect the data for you and analyze it in different ways. And then what you want to build is the integrative technologies to power that, right? And really pull it all together. So I would say that would be one way to do it to begin with, and then you can get a working platform going where you can scale it and have more pilots. You need more than one, right? And then you can go to investors and say, look at the success we have, look at the results we can get. And what we need is we're going to raise money so that we can continue our development, because this is oftentimes what people, raise money for, continue our development. And we're going to pay our slave talent, that's been building us so far. And then we're also going to apply this to increasing our data capabilities in analytics so that then we can give it back to the schools and the educators so that they can better their math teaching, right?
Yes. Now, alongside of that is giving that data to the students.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And to their peer tutors.
You know what? You could do that pretty cheap right now. I would say get some young people, interns, who know how to Instagram. Kids are on Instagram. So put together like little like visuals about what this does for them, for the students. And then Instagram it out. And then the students, if they find it interesting, they're going to share. Other people who know social media better than me, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you could just do it on the cheap right now. And then if the students hear about it and get interested in it, right, they might start to ask for it. TikTok, Lil says TikTok. Yes, TikTok. Kids are on TikTok, right?
Right, the video platform,
yeah.
Right.
Abby?
Yeah.
Well, I might make a suggestion. That's my background is actually in, marketing and helping to get the word out about different things. But one, I believe that partnerships are kind of the way of the future. This has nothing to do with data necessarily, but someone who has your customer base that you might want to partner up with, either for some sort of revenue share, or sometimes they need to provide value to their customer. And one group is really this, the people that cater to moms, especially new moms. Once you have that customer, there's nothing to do with them after they've engaged with you. So there are successful companies like MomBox and places like this that might actually, for the longevity to keep them as a customer, they might actually need to have services like yours so that they continue to offer value. And that way you don't have to start from scratch to find, that person.
So this would be a path to a homeschooling solution, is that?
Well, not only homeschooling, but I know as a mom, I was a very busy PTA person because I wanted to make sure that my daughter's school, there were good things happening and I wanted to see what was going on in the school, right? So PTAs are very involved, right? Schools don't have a full budget. So PTAs tend to raise money to supplement. Class parents are involved with the PTA and they raise money for the classrooms because there's not enough budgets for even supplies, right? So PTAs are powerful, but they're kind of, disjointed. And the PTA every year when there was a new election, it was a new set of people, a new leadership, right? But PTAs are, like where people have social capital, right? So they try to use that, right? So there's also mom bloggers, right? And then, Lil put in there, Jim Quick. Do you know Jim Quick?
No.
Look in the chat. He started out as memory retention, and recently I heard him talk on a conference about all the different things he's starting to get into, including like how you eat, how you exercise to improve your brain function, right? So, for instance, someone like him, if he gets interested in what you're doing, because he might be interested, right? That's a really interesting partnership. He has tons of people who know him and follow him, right? And then, just getting a mention by him would make you huge. Now, the thing is, before you do a lot of this, you have to make sure that you are ready to deal with the onslaught of interest that you're going to get, right? So that's why I just suggest if you want to reach out to students to start with, just start with maybe Instagram, just to, like getting some people to, or getting people who know other young people to just share a few Instagram posts, right? And then test out like, what is the response to that? You can have them do a tag, and then you can follow up with the tag, and just to test it first, right? To see how the response and how they're sharing it and things like that, right?
Yeah, in fairness, there's several years of testing already done. So
what kind of testing do you mean?
Well, my partner Joe was in school districts for 9 years before the recession of 08-09 shut down his consulting business. But he had 36 school districts subscribing. There was really nothing computerized. It was all PDFs off of CDs.
So is it data from before 2009?
Yes.
I would say that might be a little outdated.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And especially with COVID, things have really changed. And people are rethinking education in a way they were not before COVID.
Correct.
Right. So
Yes.
what I would do is I would maybe use that data and try to test it to see what's still relevant, what's not. Right. And maybe one easy way to do it, I'm gonna borrow a page from what Trip might say. I'm gonna channel Trip. I would suggest that you might reach out to various people, influential people in education, and say, okay, this is like some recent data we have. This is like some past data we have. We'd like to just get your, expert feedback on it. Right? You can test it that way. And if they get interested in it, they might say, you might explore, say, could we do a partnership on, really validating this data or gathering new data? What data is missing, right? That we don't have, that we need to collect, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
But we're about 10 days from completing the MVP. And so
it doesn't matter. Even if you have
we'll be doing it in that environment is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so, even if you have an MVP, data strategies should be constantly updated. You should constantly be testing it because data is changing fast. The environment and society is changing fast, right? Norms are changing. It seems like almost daily, right? Almost like year to year, norms are different, right? So I will keep pushing that, right? Because the other thing is, while you have some success now, if it's going to really, you're going to really scale big, right? You need to really understand, okay, given how we're coming out of COVID, how are students really doing in math? How are they responding to math? And are they responding differently to your approaches than they were before COVID, right?
Right.
Yeah. And then are the ones who are studying more at home and virtually, are they responding differently than the ones who are using it, who are doing school, in school, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of different kinds of data now that you have to check and test, right? And then also, I totally believe that younger people's brains are just becoming totally wired differently than our brains are, right? Older brains are. And then even my brain, I feel like, is becoming differently wired because of the way I have approached things, right? And so I think it's really important to understand that in the context of what you are doing. And then that kind of data, it's hard for, like teachers and students and parents to put together. But if you contextualize that data with what you are doing for the kids, that's even more powerful, right? And then you guys become a thought leader and the people to go to for this kind of stuff. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Okay, good luck. Who wants to go next?
Munif, you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Bonnie. My name is Munif, and I'm one of the mentees of Bonnie through Founder Institute of New York.
Okay.
And I'm the co-founder of Arcbase. Arcbase is a Web3 intellectual property website that curates ecosystem to help inventors build moonshot products using token economics. This is our first big pivot. We started 18 months ago with an older version that was based on equity split for the development of inventions. We gathered like around 240 members, but no actual collaboration was done. And we shut down that project and started the crypto economics based model. And now we're relaunching very soon.
Okay. Okay. First of all, I'm very excited about the crypto environments and ecosystems, right? Not cryptocurrency per se, but blockchain and the possibilities of the integration with blockchain, right? I'm not totally convinced that blockchain is the sole solution for many things, right? So I still think that blockchain integrated in other uses is much more powerful, right? You have a really grand tagline here, helping founders build moonshots based on token economics. That's big.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
huge.
maybe a little too big.
Okay.
Right? I think you have to be careful because while everybody wants possibilities and they want to think big, I think thinking big is really hard for people. And, you know, I've talked about this with Bonnie and Trip before, but I think a lot of founders that I see, they're not thinking big, right? And then also they're getting told, to be fair, by investors, you need to narrow your focus, right? You need to have your first, who is your first target? That's too much, right? And you hear that all the time. And, you know, one of my specialties is thinking big and then trying to figure out the roadmap to that big thing. But a lot of people, they think big and then they can't figure out how to get there, right? So like I heard someone with Girls Who Code say, the girls do really great when they're on a scaffolded system, but when we take them off and we say, okay, build your own, right? Architect your own system. They said they have a lot of trouble, right? Because taking those training wheels away is really hard, right? So it's not as easy as bicycle riding. So I think what you need to think about is maybe, do you have like a system for helping them think through the whole getting to the moonshot?
Yes, basically what we're trying to do is nurture the idea from the abstract, just drone stage, and then get help to CAD design it, then prototype it through the use of the token economics. So each invention will have their own coin. This way the incentives will be aligned, and
Who are the people you're reaching out to?
We have three main categories. First, we were struggling with two-sided platforms. Now it's like 3 or 4. So the main ones are the inventors who have the moonshot ideas or product ideas. The second ones are the contributors, the ones who actually develop and build the ideas from the design to the prototype to the legal work, all that professional services. And the third ones are the investors who want to have backstage access to the intellectual property from the early stage. So we need to start with the inventors and contributors before we reach to the out to the investors.
Okay, that wasn't actually what I was asking. So
yeah, you want to rephrase? That's okay.
No. So here's the thing. I've seen a lot of founders, and I'm a broken record when I say problem solution fit, because so many founders are focused on the technology, and the way you talk about it, you're focused on the technology. So oftentimes founders have a solution that's looking for a problem to solve. And those kind of companies have the hardest time gaining traction, right? And growing. They can get early traction. I've seen a lot of startups. I think it's really easy to get early traction relatively, right? You reach out to your friends, blah, 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 right? And you go, we got 300 people, and we're going to grow to 1 billion. Really? How are you going to do that, right? And then I see startups stall out, right? So I think what you have to do is, first of all, a lot of people are excited about crypto, but they don't understand it. They don't understand. I just really even had a very bright intern who's at Stanford, and he wants to start, and he's done a lot of really amazing things. And he's like, well, actually, of the projects that you're working on, I'm interested in the projects with blockchain because I don't understand it and I want to learn it. Right? So I think what you have to do, and the reason why I ask, who are you reaching out to? Like, for instance, I found when I was teaching, and it certainly has held true with founders, I have to approach and work with women and people of color differently than the white guys, right? Who are privileged, right? Or even white women, often white women or women who are privileged, right? Because they have a different set of life experiences and exposure, right? Than, some women and people of color, right? Many people of color. So I have had to think and talk differently to them. So I think, for instance, when you say crypto, right? Maybe you need to make accessible what the possibilities of crypto are. So it's not just starting with, here, give me the idea. Everybody has a lot of ideas, but the success of the idea is in the nuances, and then it's in the execution, right? And then it's ability to convince other people that your idea has merit, right? So there's a number of things along the way. So it's not just their idea, but you have to think about, what is the problem that they actually want to solve? Inventors just invent for the sake of inventing, right? Yeah. And they go, this is really cool. And they're pretty happy with that, right? They're not entrepreneurs. So I think what you have to do is, I'm not sure if you want to go after the inventors or you want to help people who really want to become entrepreneurs, because there are some inventors that want to become entrepreneurs. Some say they do, and I don't think they do. They sabotage themselves all the time, and they will never make it as successful business people. But some have the hunger and they want to do it, right? So yeah. I think you need to really identify those. You need to identify who's solving the right problem, and have they figured out that, blockchain essentially is a distributed ledger. It helps you do security and it helps you collaborate really well, right? That's a fundamental basis of what blockchain enables, right? And a lot of people, they don't understand that. They get all like, kind of worked up about Ethereum and the tokens and what kind of tokens and what do they do and all this, right? And I think what you have to do is you have to maybe help clarify. And so if you are going to help them to build crypto products, right? Then I think what you have to do is some amount of education depending on the audience you want to reach. If you want the white bros, you probably don't need to do education. If you want people and women and people of color, you probably have to do some education, right? And exposure programs. And that's a way to also recruit, right? And some people, they may not actually be inventors, but a lot of people have one really good idea inside them. And it's a matter of helping them really hone that idea, right? Because ideas are worthless. Everybody has ideas. And everybody always said, oh, I had that idea. I'm like, yeah, it's worthless because you didn't do anything with it, right? It's the ability to take an idea and make it manifest in the market that makes you an entrepreneur. And then if you get people to pay you for that, then you're a really successful entrepreneur, right? So that's what it's about, right? So think about it that way, and the nuance of how you shape it makes all the difference in the kind of people you're going to attract and how they're going to approach thinking about what I'm going to come into this with. Does that make sense?
A lot, yes, a lot of
Yeah.
sense. I really
Okay.
appreciate it. Yeah, I
Okay.
think we do. I put like 3 up arrows on education because we are targeting those who were not.
I kind of had a feeling. So yeah, that's why I
Yeah,
brought
thank
that
you.
up.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah, that's great.
And I'm with you. All the more power to you. So
Thanks.
I would say, and then maybe instead of saying moonshots, because especially like if you're a woman and a person of color, we know whether it's conscious or unconscious, we know we have limited opportunities. I always have to prove myself. I get asked harder questions than guys that I see, right? I always know that I have to show bigger results. And then I've seen guys raise funds on ether, on not even like real ether, just air, right? And fumes, right? And I'm like, I had a company that exited in 2.5 years that I started from idea stage. And yet I have no fund, right? They're still like, show me proof, show me proof, show me proof, right? So those people understand that they have limited possibilities. So people are going to be hesitant. And I find this with women all the time. They're hesitant. When I hear a really interesting idea, woman talking about her, I'm like, oh, I want to talk to you. And she's like, it's not there yet. I'll come back to you later. And I'm like, no, I want to talk to you right now. Now is the time I want to talk to you. I can help you now, right? But they're reluctant, right? So if you say moonshot, in some ways, it may be a little intimidating and they may say, well, I may not have a moonshot. I may have a really good idea that will
Remarkable.
be a $100 million business, but it may not be a unicorn, right? So think about how you message that. And that's again where you might want to do some kind of sentiment, analysis research to understand with the people who are engaging with you, what is resonating, what do they need, what do they think they need versus what you think they need, right? And then how do you bridge that understanding? Because that's a big divide. Like, the whole point of the fact that founders do not understand data, right? There's a divide between what I understand they need about data versus what they think they need about data. And part of my first job, if I want them to be this high performing data company, is to bridge that divide, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate it.
Okay, sorry, we're running low on
I
time.
know.
Who wants to go next?
Well, we have Adrian and Jenu have been here.
Okay.
Do you want to come? Who was the last to enter?
I'm happy to hop in.
Okay.
Hi, June. Nice to meet you.
You too. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I am Adrian. I'm the founder of Reveal. We're building software to automate the paperwork around content creation. And we're starting in the music industry because that's where I started my career in. So what we're really doing is we're helping creators deal with the copyright, the metadata, the contracts, and all of this admin work that's related to creating content. Most creators don't really know how to handle it. And when they do, they make a lot of errors. These errors result in royalties that don't go back to them, that stay in black boxes. And lack of recognition. They're not credited properly, which can hurt their career down the road. It can also impede opportunities if the song is not cleared properly, and all of a sudden, a Netflix show comes and they want to, use that song for a show. They can't do it because the copyright's not cleared, all of that stuff. So these administrative tasks are so crucial, but creators don't really have the tools to do them properly. And only when they get to a certain point where they can actually afford a whole team of managers and lawyers and admin folks can they really get it right. So we decided to build software that can help them do these tasks so that they can be more professional and make sure that they, sort of run their businesses in a more professional and smooth way. We opened up our beta in August, and we've been growing steadily since. We have over 500 beta users now. We're growing about between 15 to 25% weekly. What we've been learning is that we can save creators up to like 6.5 hours of admin work per song. Obviously, it depends on how many collaborators they have and all of that. But we're really happy with these numbers, and currently gearing up to fundraise a pre-seed, looking to raise $750K to basically build up the product, really reinforce the viral loop. What we're seeing in the platform is that per song, users credit 3.4 collaborators. So there's a really strong potential for product-led growth, and we want to make sure we can capture that. So building out that viral loop, and then testing the revenue model, which will be a SaaS, a freemium SaaS. So basic features for free so that everyone can onboard, and then additional features such as contracts, or if you release a certain number of songs, put you back into the paying or up into the paying tier, which we think will be around $9 per month per user. So looking forward to be able to test that. And what else should I add? The way we look at the market is, well, our initial niche is what we call emerging artists. And there are millions of them out there, but we're targeting really 2.5 million emerging artists who already have traction, but just don't generate enough revenue to have lawyers and admin folks and managers, etc. So that's our initial niche. But the music creator market has 25 million music creators, according to SoundCloud. And then down the road, we're seeing a lot of parallels between the type of admin work that has to be done in music with what has to be done in video production, or in podcasting, or in photography sets. So really the possibility to tweak the platform for different types of content creation. So that means that our TAM is, the whole creative industry pretty much, with 150 million.
I'm going to stop you there if you don't mind, because we're running low on time.
Yeah.
And then also too, because I have some thoughts for you, right?
Yeah, please.
So I think it's really interesting what you're doing, right? I think you have the wrong messaging.
Okay, interesting.
You're like, you said, software to automate paperwork around content creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, kind of boring. And then as you started to talk more and you talked about copywriting and things like that, then it gets much more interesting, right? So it's not admin work. That may be how content creators think about it, but really it's about the process of protecting IP for content creators. Mm-hmm. That's what it is, right?
Yeah, there's definitely that component for sure.
So, and you can say it's about, or you could say it's about running, protecting your business and, protecting the value of your business and increasing your efficiencies, whatever, but you need to talk about it differently. Not much, so, partly for the creator side, but your customers, but also if you're going to raise money.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I met you in the elevator, I said, what do you do? And you gave me your tagline, I'd be like, good luck to you, bye. Not interesting, right? So then the other thing is that you're talking about a freemium SaaS model. I think your business model, you need to think about, rethink.
Okay.
And you're talking about creating a standalone platform with different tiers and things like that. That's a lot of work, right? And I think it'll take time to build up. I actually think there's a ton of startups and new companies that are forming to help content creators streamline their content creation, right? But if I'm a content creator and I have to go, okay, I go there, but then I have to get off that platform to go to your platform to do the admin side. I'm like, that's a pain in the butt, right? I think you will have better traction if you form strategic partnerships with all these new content creation website platforms, right? And then because what that does is it helps you exponentially increase your reach with potential customers.
Yep.
All of them have those problems, right? And so I would start out like looking for a music partner. But you're absolutely right in that the video and podcast creation, it's a heck of a lot of work. It's more convoluted than the music creation, right? So I would start to get a couple strategic partnerships, pilot partnerships lined up with them right away, right? And then what you want to do is collect, you didn't talk about your data strategy, but you want to collect data points around like, how much do they use it? How, where are the, usage coming from, right? And then also like, how are they using it, right? What is the actual process stream of how they use the different features of your platform, right?
Yeah.
And as you walk through and map that stuff out, right, you become an incredibly useful partner for any of these new companies that are forming, right? And then these content creation companies are getting a lot of interest from acquirers, right? And so if you're embedded as a partner, then you will get the interest of their investors and the acquirers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep, totally. Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate that.
I'm going to stop because it's 11. Bonnie, do we need to hop off?
Oh, we missed Janu, unless you have time to stay and listen to Janu. And
It's Brenda, is it okay if we hear Janu real quick?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Okay.
oh, just in case people have to leave early. Brenda, you want to talk about the event?
Yes, I just want to invite everyone. We're having a happy hour at KettleSpace at Crave Fish Bar in the Upper West Side. So I'm going to leave the link for RSVP. It's today at 4. If you guys want to meet in person and have a drink, I'll put it over here.
You should go, June. It's not far from you.
I'll try. I don't know if I have anything at that time, so.
I'll share it.
But anyways, Janu, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I mean, we're not really raising money. I just had a quick question. I work in the AI space, also data science, and we're working on some new projects. We're not really ready to raise money yet. I'm just wondering, first is the difference between raising money in the West Coast and the East Coast, and how do I find like people, the right investor, AI, with my industry, and where should I go to the West Coast or the East Coast when we are ready to raise money? Yeah.
You've told me nothing about you, so I can't answer that. Tell me a little bit more. What industry? What are you doing?
I mean, we're working on some initial products, but I don't have an MVP or anything ready. Working on
right, but
yeah.
Just tell me your concept and what kind of AI are you using? I don't know. AI data science is so huge.
Right. No, I'm just wondering in terms of if you want to find all investors in AI space, how do you find that?
There is no all investors in AI space, and it's not like we have a little clubhouse we hang out in and go, hey, we're here, right? So you need to tell me more if you want actionable, useful advice from me.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, we're very early stage. I'm working on several different ideas, so I'm not really ready to, have a concrete this thing for it.
Okay, I can't help you. You even at this early stage, you need to be able to talk high level about it, right? So we're launching a new company, and it's in the health tech space, but it's a blockchain enabled data aggregation play, right? So like I can say that much, and I haven't given out any secret sauce, right? So you need to learn how to talk about it in a way, because that is also that is a way to share, and sharing stories is really important data. That was like the original way humans shared data, right? So you need to come up with some kind of story about who you are, what you're doing, right? So you need to give high level something, what you're working on, or you could have even told me we're working specifically in the NLP space, right? Or we're working with facial recognition. Like we're working with a company that is spectroscopy, and they have shrunk spectroscopy from giant machines to something that fits in your smartphone, right? That alone, I haven't given out any secret sauce, but that alone piques your interest, right? So you need to learn how to talk about it. And then you could also talk about something about yourself to validate that you're someone I need to listen to, right? So like you could say, I used to work at NASA, right? That will pique my interest, right? But you've given me nothing. And I find that founders who are super cagey about what they're doing and super secretive, I find that they're not that exciting, interesting. And they just think they're more, interesting than they are.
Okay.
Does that help? Right?
Yeah, that's a good feedback. I think it's just, I need to come up with, we're working on so many different ideas. So I think I need to come up with something good.
You need to narrow it down. Or you could even say, we're trying to solve this problem in this sector, right? So think about that. As far as generally in AI, AI investors are everywhere, and a lot of investors that don't even know they're AI, they are investors. Investors are as data illiterate as anybody else, right? And Bonnie will attest to that. The thing is, though, that it depends on what you have. So, if you want to get investment, you might be trying to get it from the data play, or you might be trying to get it from the market play, or you might be trying to get it from the problem that you're solving for people, right? And then there's all kinds of investors. Everybody is interested in data now. Like I'll tell you, like 7-8 years ago, when I was just conceptualizing Serval, people did not understand data, right? And they're like, what's that mean? You're going to be a data focused company. I'm like, there's a lot of opportunities with data, but people didn't get it, right? Now you say data and people are like, well, yeah, that's kind of valuable, isn't it? That's important, right? Then the other thing is that corporations, right? They have massive amounts of data, and they're realizing that they need to figure out ways to deal with their data. So actually, depending on what you're developing, for some data companies, corporates might be your best investors, right? Rather than VCs. So, or angels. So that's something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Good luck.
Tommy, you want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted, Tommy.
Tommy.
Hi guys, I will let you go soon. Everyone has lives to leave. I believe I have spoken to or seen June around, but
I've seen you.
Okay.
Ladies who lead.
Normally around Bonnie, she's always the number one suspect. So I was really impressed, June, with like the comprehensiveness and like relevance of your answers. I come from a data background. Most recently, I just finished a master's in data science. I've always loved deep learning. I've always loved NLP. I was drawing like a system, like different network diagrams before I even knew what a neural network was in high school. So I really am like spiritually like involved in the technology that's coming out, or at least philosophically involved in the technology that's coming out now. But I've done a bunch of things in community, etc. Some of you have already heard my story, so hopefully it's okay that I'm being brief. But I'm working actually on the problem of online dating right now, in addition to some other things that are more deep learning focused. So I'd love
If
to
you solve that, you will be elevated to goddess status.
Well,
So
I understand. And rightly so, because it is like the central part of so many people's lives. It just makes everything else work, and yet we don't focus on it. We don't.
and incredibly difficult.
Yes. But you know, I think like even incremental improvement, which I don't aim for. I aim for the whole shebang. Would be like lauded, you know, by so many people and would help them. So yeah, I look forward to hopefully getting your thoughts on that, along with Bonnie's as I move along in the development process. But yeah, I'm just so glad to have you here, and what a strong voice you have for
Thank you.
in terms of investing style. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess she's not ready for her data strategy yet.
I understand, but thank you all for coming, and congratulations on your masters, and thank you so much. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, KettleSpace.
Yes, thank you, KettleSpace. Thank you, everybody. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for the next online investor breakfast, and see you then. And have a wonderful day. And 2 weeks.